The history of Palestine over the past century is one of a struggle. While Israel attempts to erase Palestine from the map and eliminate the memory and even the very existence of the Palestinian people, there is a story about Palestinians that almost no one remembers. I'm talking about the Palestinian Arab communists who came to Spain to fight against fascism. I'm David Cott, host of New History of Spain, and today I will tell you the story of three Palestinians who played a role in the Spanish Civil War and delve into the reasons why they were rejected and forgotten both in Palestine and in the Spanish Republic. The International Brigades, composed of foreign volunteers fighting for the Republic, never exceeded 40,000 combatants. Of these, Abdul Latif Ben Salem estimated that around 800 came from Arab countries, while historian Andreu Castells put the number at 716, nearly 500 of them from Algeria and about 200 from Morocco. These volunteers were not organized into their own battalion, which may have been a deliberate decision due to the Republicans' distrust of North Africans, an issue I will explore later. As a side note for any American listener, when I say Republican, I mean the supporters of the Spanish Republic, which in the context of the Spanish Civil War were mostly leftists. The participation of fighters from other Arab countries was much more limited. There were at least 3 Tunisians, 2 Iraqis, 3 Egyptians, 11 Syrians, 1 Lebanese, and 4 Arabs from Saudi Arabia. As for people from Palestine, there were between 125 and 160, but the vast majority of them were Ashkenazi Jews, not Palestinian Arabs, because most members of the Palestinian Communist Party were Jewish. Only 2 Palestinian Arabs are known to have fought in Spain, and in addition there was 1 Palestinian who did not participate as a fighter, but as a propagandist. Military doctor Jorge Jarufe has sometimes been counted as Palestinian, but in reality he was from Peru, born to Palestinian parents who had emigrated in the 19th century. Regarding Palestine, it's important to remember that it was governed by the Ottoman Empire until the British conquered it and, under the League of Nations, established the British Mandate for Palestine. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, supporting Zionist Jewish efforts to establish Jewish settlements in Palestine. This was the first step that would later lead to the creation of the State of Israel. By 1936, 1/3 of Palestine's population was Jewish, mainly immigrants from Central and Eastern Europe. These tensions triggered the Arab Revolt of 1936 to 1939, which coincided with the Spanish Civil War and thus limited the number of fighters willing to come from Palestine. Ali Abdelkhalek and Fawzi Sabri Nabulsi are the only Palestinian Arabs definitively known to have joined the International Brigades. These 2 Palestinians were part of the Naftali Bodwin Jewish Company of the José Palafox Battalion, a unit made up primarily of Yiddish-speaking Jews. What is known about Al-Khalek and Nabulsi comes mainly from the memoirs of Jewish comrades and Hebrew-language press reports. Fawzi Sabri Nabulsi was described as a fair-skinned Arab and a short, red-haired man. Ali Abdelkhalek worked as a baker in Jerusalem at a Jewish-owned establishment, which led him to interact with socialists and to learn Yiddish. After joining the Palestinian Communist Party in 1927, he was sent to Moscow and became a member of the party's Central Committee. Jewish comrades describe him in their memoirs as a persuasive speaker, an intelligent and capable militant who fought against the British Mandate and both Arab and Jewish nationalism, a man who advocated for friendship between Arabs and Jews in Palestine. Al-Khalek spent several years in prison for spreading communist propaganda, enduring prolonged hunger strikes and preferring to remain naked rather than wear a prisoner's uniform. The British police took advantage of the Arab Revolt against the British and Zionists to arrest around 200 members of the Palestinian Communist Party. It is possible that in this context, Al-Khalek and Nabulsi were arrested and deported, prompting them to go to Spain to fight against fascism. Al-Khalek and Nabulsi entered Spain via the French border on October 17, 1936, alongside numerous Jewish Palestinian volunteers. Polish-born Israeli Michael Braun described them as follows, quote, "Fawzi was young, lively, and full of life, while Comrade Ali was a tall, middle-aged man with a deep political awareness characteristic of a communist leader. Ali's radiant personality, his smiling face, and his pleasant voice attracted many around him, as he often sang Arabic, Yiddish, and Russian songs." End quote. Nabulsi operated a machine gun and was wounded in the Battle of Lleida in March 1938. He was taken to Paris for treatment and later ended up in the French refugee camp of Gurs, which housed many brigaders after the war. In a 1986 article, Israeli Zionist Yeshayahu Sidqi accused Nabulsi of being a solitary man who pulled a knife and attempted to stab a Zionist during a dispute over Palestine. Sidqi claimed they had become friends after sharing a hospital room for a month, but that after his death, he discovered that Fawzi Sabri Nabulsi had been a fundamentalist terrorist who had killed many Jews between 1936 and 1938. For this reason, he titled his article, "My Friend, the Terrorist." However, Amos Levin, a Jewish comrade of Nabulsi's in the Naftali Bodwin Company, accused Sidqi of lying. Levin stated that Nabulsi was no terrorist but an anti-fascist fighter who fought for the Republic and later for the French resistance against the German occupation. He reportedly died of tuberculosis in 1948. This information was confirmed by Nabulsi's partner, a Jewish woman named Sarah Schnitzer, who gave birth to their only daughter in 1941. As for Ali Abdelkalek, on February 16, 1938, his company was in the Sierra Quemada Mountains in Extremadura when they were suddenly attacked by the rebel forces. Al-Kalek was among the first to charge at the fascists, but was wounded. He was taken to the hospital in Albacete, where he died 2 days later in the presence of a Jewish volunteer nurse. Palestinian journalist and novelist Hussein Yassin, upon learning Al-Kalek's story, used his retirement in 2012 to locate the burial site of the Palestinian fighter. He traveled to Albacete and, after numerous attempts, obtained documentation revealing where his remains were. His grave was abandoned and unmarked, so Yassin paid out of his own pocket for the construction of a tombstone dedicated to Al-Kalek. The inscription in Arabic reads, "Ali, the story of an honest man," while in Spanish it says, "In memory of a Palestinian brigadier." Hussein Yassin later wrote a historical novel based on Al-Kalek's life, which was published in Arabic and Spanish. Leaving aside the 2 Palestinian fighters, the other Palestinian known to have come to Spain was Muhammad Najati Sidqi. We have a considerable amount of information about him because he wrote a memoir. Born in Jerusalem to a Turkish father and a Palestinian mother, Najati Sidqi began working in the 1920s for the Palestinian Post and Telegraph Company, where he met socialist Jews. Between 1924 and 1929, he studied at the Communist University of the Toilers of the East, an institution dedicated to training communist cadres for Asia and the Arab countries. He returned to Palestine during the riots in Jerusalem, which left over 200 Arabs and Jews dead. After this, the Communist Party of Palestine became less Jewish-dominated, and Najati Sidqi joined the party's Central Committee, as did Al-Kalek. Following a trip to Moscow, Muhammad was arrested by the British colonial authorities and spent 2 years in prison. Later, he became involved in France with the publication of an Arab communist magazine aimed at promoting independence movements in Arab-speaking countries. Sidqi was visiting Moscow when the Spanish Civil War broke out. One of the main leaders of the Communist International proposed sending the Palestinian to assist the Communist Party of Spain in encouraging Moroccan troops on the enemy side to defect, and sparking an independence uprising in Spanish Morocco. This, in turn, was expected to open a new front against the rebels and lead to their defeat. At 31 years old and traveling with a false passport, Najati Sidqi went to Paris in August 1936. From there, with the help of French communist militants, he crossed the border into Spain. Muhammad Najati Sidqi did not come as a combatant, but he was enthusiastic and convinced of the importance of his propaganda mission, which, if successful, could change the course of the war. His brief stay in revolutionary Barcelona only fueled his optimism, but it was also there that he encountered the prejudices that would ultimately lead to the failure of his mission. He described his experience in Barcelona as follows, quote, "Suddenly, I came across a group of militiamen. Their leader, believing I was Spanish, approached me and, speaking in Spanish, said, 'Why don't you join us?' Smiling, I responded in French with all the enthusiasm of youth. 'I am an Arab volunteer, and I have come to defend Damascus in Guadalajara, Jerusalem in Córdoba, Baghdad in Toledo, Cairo in Cádiz, and Tetuan in Burgos. His face showed both astonishment and joy, and in broken French, he said, "Are you really an Arab? Are you a Moor? That's impossible. The Moroccans are with the fascist murderers, attacking our cities, looting our homes, and raping our women." End quote. In Madrid, he met with communist leaders such as José Díaz, Dolores Ibarruri, and Vicente Uribe, and he quickly got to work. From September onwards, using the name Mustafa Ibn Hada to sound Moroccan, he wrote articles for Mundo Obrero and other publications, and were later broadcast over loudspeakers at the front. His primary role was to make radio transmissions, write leaflets in Arabic that were dropped from planes, and address Moroccan soldiers from the trenches using a megaphone, all aimed at persuading them to defect. He also participated in interrogating Moroccan prisoners. On September 25th, while at the Córdoba front with International Brigaders, he saw Moroccan soldiers preparing for battle. Grabbing a megaphone, Najati Sidqi called out, quote, "Listen, brothers, I am an Arab like you. I have come from a distant Arab land and urge you to desert the ranks of your generals, who mistreat you in your own country. We will welcome you, pay each of you a daily wage, and for those who do not wish to fight, we will ensure your safe return to your homeland, to your land, and to your work. Long live the Popular Front! Long live the Republic! Long live President Azaña! Long live Morocco!" End quote. When his words were translated for the Spanish commander, he ordered his men to fire. Had it not been for a Republican soldier who pulled him away, the Palestinian would have been killed. It is unclear whether Sidqi's speeches and leaflets succeeded in causing desertions, but very few Moroccans switched to the Republican side during the war. The reasons for the failure of Najati Sidqi's mission were beyond his control. The Palestinian communists quickly realized the rampant racism against Moroccans in the Republican zone. The Republican press depicted Moroccans as invaders and bloodthirsty barbarians, often portrayed in blackface, and attributed to them the worst war crimes to channel hatred against the entire rebel faction through the Moors. The high probability of execution for captured Moroccan soldiers, especially at the beginning of the war, show how deeply anti-Moorish propaganda had taken root, adding to the long-standing anti-Moorish discourse in Spain. This treatment was also due to reports from some soldiers claiming that certain Moroccans falsely pretended to surrender and switch sides, declaring themselves Reds, only to attack when a Republican approached. Meanwhile, Moroccans knew they were likely to be executed if captured, which made them show little mercy and led to few desertions or surrenders. This cycle fueled mutual hatred and distrust, making bridge building impossible, as Sidqi had hoped. His conscience would not allow him to make false promises of repatriation and good treatment to Moroccan soldiers on the rebel side without guarantees that he could keep his word. On October 3rd, Sidqi founded the Hispan-Moroccan anti-fascist group along with some Moroccans and anti-colonialist Spaniards, aiming to encourage Moroccan desertions and persuade Republicans that the Moors had only joined the rebels due to deceit, coercion, and the poverty caused by Spanish colonialism. Through this organization, Sidqi tried to form a battalion of Moroccan deserters and prisoners of war. However, the Popular Front government and members of the Communist Party of Spain did not support his project. He wrote in his memoirs, quote, "I carried out this work fully convinced of its importance, but when the news reached the newspapers, my Spanish comrades reproached me, saying they were wary of an organization of that kind. I remember that my Spanish comrades took a more theoretical than practical approach to Moroccans and Moroccan issues. I noticed in them, especially in Vicente Uribe, an absolute lack of trust in any Moroccan. More than once, I pointed out the executions of captured Moroccan soldiers, and deep in my heart, I felt that my mission was failing." End quote. On October 31st, Sidqi published an article in Mundo Obrero denouncing how the People's Court sentenced 3 Moroccan soldiers from the regular army to life imprisonment for aiding the fascist rebellion, while a Spaniard was acquitted on the grounds of having thoughtless offered support. There was clearly a double standard and a discriminatory treatment toward Moroccans. Sidqi argued that most Moroccans, on the side of the right-wing traitors, had been forced or deceived into participation, writing, quote, We have said many times, and we maintain, that it is possible to save Moroccan soldiers from the clutches of the fascist rebels if our Republican government were to issue orders to change the treatment of captured and deserting Moors. That is, to treat them at least the same as the Spanish soldiers who had been deceived by the fascists and joined the Republic's militias. If Moroccan soldiers saw that the Republican government respected the lives of their captured and deserting Moroccan brothers within our ranks, they will not hesitate for a moment to come to our side." End quote. This article likely displeased many leaders in Republican Madrid. On November 4, 1936, after a fascist bombing of Getafe and Madrid's University City, an incident occurred that worsened relations between the Arab and Spanish communist leaders. Quote, "During the approach of the Moroccans to Madrid, the Central Committee convened an emergency meeting. I happened to be there, and my comrades considered my presence inappropriate, so they frankly asked me to leave the room, as I was not a committee member. Vicente Uribe signaled to the orderly Ortega, who, taking me gently by the arm, led me out of the room. Then he said, 'Comrade Mustafa, your group has reached the gates of Madrid.' End quote. They did not see him as one of them. Among his supposed Spanish comrades, Muhammad Najati Sidqi was treated with distrust and disdain simply for being an Arab. The optimism with which he had come to Spain quickly faded, and his experiences made him question his internationalist convictions. The suspicions, anti-Arab racism, and lack of sensitivity and support from Spanish socialists and communists for Morocco's independence led Sidqi to leave Spain in December. His story is a tragic one. Despite the treatment he received, he still wanted to help and proposed setting up a secret radio station in Algeria to encourage Moroccans to avoid recruitment. But he was unable to carry out this mission. He spent a few months in Paris until Moscow arranged for his repatriation to Lebanon. A few years later, he was expelled from the Palestinian Communist Party for refusing to return to Spain and for his firmly pro-independence stance for the Arab world, which clashed with the colonial mindset of some Spanish and French communists. However, he went on to have a successful career as a writer, book translator, and radio broadcaster until his death in Athens in 1979. This is the story of the 3 Palestinian Arabs who came to Spain and took part in the civil war supporting the Republic, some with weapons, others with the pen. But why were they rejected in their time, both in Spain and in Palestine? And why have they been forgotten by historiography and collective memory? The few Palestinian Arabs, or Arabs in general, who joined the International Brigades faced a double marginalization. On one hand, they suffered racism and distrust from Spanish Republicans and Communists, who lumped them together under the label Moors. On the other hand, they were rejected by the majority in their home countries, especially by Muslim conservatives and nationalists, who opposed atheism, communism, internationalism, and progressive ideas regarding gender equality. In other words, Palestinian and Arab anti-fascists were accepted neither in their homelands nor in the places where they went to fight fascism. In British Mandate Palestine, communist universalist ideals and Arab-Jewish solidarity were seen as acts of betrayal by both Zionists and Arab nationalists. Furthermore, both Najati Sidqi and Nabulsi had romantic relationships with Jewish communist women, which further marked them as outsiders and traitors in the strained relations between Arabs and Jews. Some Arab anti-fascists, like Najati Sidqi, believed that the fall of fascist regimes would help liberate Arab peoples. But that was not the predominant view in the Arab world. The dominant trend was pro-fascist, based on the idea that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, as Arab countries were under British and French colonial rule, even though those nations presented themselves as democratic. Muslims were highly hostile toward communism and the Soviet Union due to their atheism and their destruction of the traditional patriarchal social order. Palestinian Arab press and public opinion sided with the rebels, while the Republicans were branded as communist heretics. Moreover, as was sometimes the case in Francoist propaganda, anti-Jewish sentiment was channeled into blaming Jews for Bolshevism and for instigating the war in Spain. This made the 3 Palestinian Arabs that went to Spain doubly sinful and traitorous in their homeland, as they fought in the service of the infidels of the Soviet Communist International and alongside Zionists, French and British volunteers, the colonial oppressors of the Arab people. Not to mention that they had left Palestine to fight in a foreign country while Palestinians were waging their own struggle against British imperialism and Zionism. Unlike veterans of the Allied forces in World War II, who were recognized as war heroes both at home and abroad, International Brigades veterans were only celebrated in communist countries and took much longer to receive recognition in Western democracies. Jewish communists who fought in the Spanish Civil War began to be incorporated into the Zionist historical narrative in the 1970s, linking the fight against fascism in Spain with resistance against the Nazis. However, in Palestinian nationalist narratives, the participation of Palestinian Arabs in the Spanish Civil War alongside Jews has no place in it. A history of collaboration holds no utility for the national liberation when they have been and continue to be displaced and exterminated by Zionist Jews. And in Spain, the story of Arabs who fought for the Republic is left in a drawer to avoid the exposure of a deeply racist past against Moroccans, something that clashes with the anti-colonialist and internationalist ideals that the left is supposed to have. The recovery of the memory of Najati, Sidqi, Al-Khalek and Nabulsi reminds us that the universalist path of brotherhood is possible, despite the tragic resurgence of nationalist discourses, and particularly in Palestine, the witnessing of humanity at its worst. If you enjoyed this episode, give it a like and subscribe to New History of Spain if you are new. You can keep up with the new episodes by joining the Discord server. You can support me at patreon.com/newhistoryspain in exchange for early access to all my content, a mention in the credits, and exclusive merch. Thank you for your attention and see you next time!